And in this house, the most dire, horrible events took place.
You are not content with the stories. Slice lives come. Be my victim.
Through watching scenes of violence, through watching scenes of transgression, through watching scenes of horror. There's an enormous amount of sort of abattoir of excess.
We all go a little mad sometimes.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you're well. For our American viewers, or if there are American viewers, I'm wishing you a very happy Thanksgiving on this Thursday, 24th of November, the 87th show we're doing for Double Feature Horror Show. And, if you're not here, if you're celebrating with your family, if you're having yourselves a lovely meal and a wholesome time, I hope you're really enjoying it. And if you're watching this on the catch-up, I hope it was a delight. Now, for everyone else, the Yanks aren't in the chat anymore, so let's start posting Yorkshire puddings. Look at those absolute beauties. Look at them. Those have risen. They look soft and flavoursome. Oh, aren't they great?
Crunchy.
Absolutely.
I don't have much else to say about Yorkshire puddings, to be honest.
I just got the idea. I thought it would be fun to do. All right. Let's talk about what we're covering tonight. Obviously, it is you and I, waifu.
It's just the two of us.
We can make it if we try. Don't worry.
I wish I knew the next line to be able to carry that on.
Just the two of us. You and I. I think there's going to be chat. If you have started typing that, kudos to you. Kudos. All right. So, yeah, this is the last episode, the last stream we're doing for Whammons Month.
Mm-hmm.
We have a Whammon here. I think that works.
That two Whammon.
Depends how much quota we're checking today. But, we did this originally because we thought there are a fair few films where we thought it would be very beneficial to have a woman's perspective. Do you want to talk about that a bit? Where you thought you need that voice in the room. Do you want to go for that for a bit?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the original idea for Whammons Month came from, I think one of the first times I appeared on the channel, other than being sarcastic in the comments, was when we were reviewing, I only have the name of On a Winter's Night, a Traveller, which is not a film.
House of the Devil.
Thank you. House of the Devil. With, I think it was Mitch. And
yeah, friend of the channel. We love Mitch.
Lovely lad. And the interesting thing was that there's a couple of key points in that film where realistically, yes, the protagonist, the young woman, should just leave many times. And in many films, there are plenty of cases where people should just leave, and often because of horror, those are young women. And Mitch was just like, yeah, it's, why wouldn't she just walk out? That's stupid. What would make her want to stay? There's nothing to make her want to stay. And I actually, watching the film, was like, no, I can understand why she's hesitant, why she's cautious, why she's afraid of putting a foot wrong. There are certain things that I think people, I was about to sound very SJW, people raised male don't necessarily always understand about what it's like being female.
That was very HR compliant. I'm impressed.
It was. I've been writing a lot of HR documents today. So there's a sense in which I think men often don't necessarily see the things that are kind of under the surface for women, and vice versa. So therefore, it was kind of interesting to maybe get some women's perspectives. Mainly this month, I'll be honest, it's been my perspective alongside proper horror shows on various films. Just to kind of see, just to sort of pick at some of those different threads and some of those things that perhaps are under the surface. And in the end, I ended up justifying why Gerald isn't all bad and in fact was done wrong, and basically women should just shag themselves into happy relationships. So perhaps this wasn't the feminist utopia we were hoping for.
It was a woman's perspective, so I think we won. Us ending up siding in favour of Gerald in Gerald's game, I think, is probably a very memorable moment for the channel. But we had a very good convo. I am impressed with the amount of cooking people have been getting up to. Rory, Mima, those are sounding delicious. I'm seeing people post their Thanksgiving chats, and I'm impressed. We like culinary boasting here on this channel. We're very in favour of it. Yeah, we did have a bit of trouble scheduling additional women due to real life stuff, unfortunately. I did very much want Poe here because I thought for Poe's possession we should have a Poe session, but she was busy, and alas, as you would expect a mother of two to be. Possibly, I do have my fingers crossed that on a future time we could get her back for Posemarie's baby, because I think the perspective of someone who's been pregnant a couple of times would be quite wonderful. I'd like actual mothers to talk about Rosemary's baby.
Yes.
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 You're nodding. You've got to vocalise on the stream. All right. But moving on from that, this wasn't particularly something that I was going to do as a Women's Month special, but it was something that people have requested multiple times. I've seen kind of consistently for a few years, when can you cover possession? And I thought, okay, I'll make a note of that. This has got some big fans. It's either got some big fans or it's going to have people who are trolling me. And I'm not sure where we're going to go. I'll also stop for a moment. Draconian, is this a review only? I wouldn't say so. I don't recognize you from the chat, so I'll just say what we do. We have a little horror topic that we cover quite quickly, and then we talk about the film in some depth. So it's not so much just a review, it's kind of an analysis. We go a bit deeper with it, and we'll probably be on for about 2 hours or less if we're very efficient. We do try and go a bit deeper than the typical review. So if that is what you like, then you're very welcome, and I hope you enjoy it.
And she gave you a thumbs up there, which I'm sure you felt.
Oh gosh,
in the
yeah.
ether.
I did. I'm just thumbs upping. I'm just gesticulating wildly with no camera to catch it. Let's see. And Eadwolf, since you're here, I will just say, I meant to dedicate one of our Giallo films to you, and I completely forgot. But I remember you were flexible about it. You were pretty happy for any of them to be dedicated to you. If you're happy for Possession to be the one for you, then you can have it. This is in your honor. And if you really do want something a bit more splattery in Giallo, we are doing Argento arc in early next year, I think. Argento. We will fix the Italian pronunciation next time, I promise.
I'll learn you good.
All right, lovely.
Sorry, I don't know where that came from.
So before we get into Possession, our horror topic here is a Ragequit, a review. Now, that's going to sound a little bit weird, okay? It's going to make you wonder, what the heck do I mean? I assume you know what I mean by a Ragequit.
Spell it out for me.
It's from gaming. It's when someone is losing so terribly, they basically just chuck the keyboard or chuck the controller and walk away in an absolute rage. I don't mean for people to actually have to sort of chuck their remote control or their laptop out the window, but I'm talking here about if someone just nopes out in the middle of the movie, can they review it?
That's an interesting one. I think, depending at what point they nope out, I think they can review it, or they can review what it is that made them nope out. They wouldn't necessarily be able to say, oh, hey, the ending was, they wouldn't be able to comment with any kind of intelligence on the end of, say, the film. But if they can talk about, I lasted 45 minutes and just the amount of, for some reason the only thing coming to my mind was like lime green slugs was pissing me off. I don't know why. If you're triggered by slugs and a film is all about slugs, you might want to leave. I'm rambling, but essentially what I'm trying to say is I think you can talk about what it is that made you give up on a film, and that in itself is quite intelligent. But I think if you get 5 minutes in and you're like, nah, I'm not feeling it, then I don't think you can.
There was actually a legal case very relevant to this. If you've been around these streams long enough, you will have heard me reference Mark Commode's The Good, the Bad and the Multiplex a couple of times. And he has a very interesting chapter in that on how reviews are used to promote films or not promote films, as it were. How it can be sort of sneaky, the relationship between studios and critics. It's rather interesting. And in that, he recounts a story of a theatre critic who was sued for giving something a 2-star review. And the legal suit was successful because the critic had not actually watched the performance. They'd sent an intern to do it and then got the intern to write it up. That is maybe some way to establishing that you do actually have to at least give it a go to give it a review. However, in contrast to that, what I'd like to raise is something from the Irish philosopher Ronan Keating, who said, "You say it best when you say nothing at all." Now, that really is quite a strong statement. He's really establishing that actually the absence can be a presence. You're looking at me so annoyed right now.
I'd forgotten you were going to do that. Judging you.
It's something to, slide past the Zoomers in the audience. So I'm merely throwing that out for a joke, but I think that is kind of interesting because there have been a few things where we have watched it and not been having a good time, and we've really been wanting to give up on the movie. And I was just thinking, as we do this, we're probably going to have cases where a guest says, "I couldn't take it, I noped out." I know Harrion got very close with Mulholland Drive. Like, he wanted to quit about an hour in.
That made me want to rage quit Harrion, frankly.
Bless him. But in fairness, what I'm trying to bounce around for a few minutes is just this idea of, can you give how solid a review can you give if you just gave it a try and noped out within like 20 minutes?
I think, as I said, I think you can talk about the experience of it. I think you can't really talk about the sort of the film itself with any great depth, but you can talk about what it was about the experience that made you kick off and walk away and leave. While you were talking, I was just looking at my copy of Sarah Kane's plays. She's a very controversial theatre writer, playwright from the 90s, who sadly, tragically ended her life when she was only in her early 20s, I think, after having written 5 extremely in-your-face plays that are they're very hard to stage. They're very violent. They would make Possession look tame and restrained and punchy in terms of dialogue. So, and a lot of her plays. So her first one had people, apparently there was the usual thing of, apparently people were throwing up in the theatre, which I don't really believe, but people walked out very early on and it was hugely controversial. There were questions about whether or not it should have been banned because it's a very violent play. And she kind of carried on that theme with various plays that sort of took some of these extremely kind of ultra-violent themes a step further each time. Horrorshow and I went to see one production of her play Cleansed in London once, and Horrorshow spent, I think, literally longer than the play lasted ranting about how annoyed it had made you because of the incoherence and inconsistency of the plot, and you found it quite boring, but at least you stuck it out. Although you said if I hadn't been there, you would have walked out.
Oh, definitely. I'm trying to remember what annoyed me so much about it, but maybe it's not all that useful. I just had a few questions I thought I'd raise here. Victoria, yes, there will be horror homework. So next week's horror homework is a David Lynch film. We're going to Lost Highway, which is going to be a lot of fun. I know, again, controversial. We're doing kind of 2 surreal horrors in a row, but this is one I wanted to cover for a while. So Lost Highway by David Lynch is next week's horror homework. I usually announce it at the end, but I think it's probably good if I announce it a bit early on as well.
Yeah, definitely.
It's probably helpful. And let's see what he... Don't think it's fair to review anything without seeing it all and trying to understand it. Disliking it is fair, but criticism without seeing a movie is relevant to me. Yeah. I mean, do you think you could look at, say, a trailer and a poster and just, as probably happened quite a few times recently. I'm thinking of Rings of Power comes to mind. I haven't watched any of it. I saw the poster, I saw the trailer, and I kind of thought, that's not for me. Now, that's not really a review. But could I say, look, I've seen what you're putting out there, and my minimal review is just absolutely not for me.
Yeah, and I think that's not really, as you say, that's not really a review so much, but it's a response to the material, and it's a response to the kind of messaging that you're being given. Yeah, I think it's I would say with the Sarah Kane stuff, and I think it applies to a lot of horror films as well, they're similar. You think about things like Saw or Hostel, films that are kind of seen as very gratuitous and over the top, and people sort of go, people write them off and just go, oh, it's torture porn, and I'm not going to review it. Or, so like newspaper reviews of those films will be quite open about the fact that they blatantly just dismiss the material and they're not very interested in it. And I think that's wrong. I think you should, particularly if you're going to be giving your opinion and saying, here's what I think about this as a representative of the genre, then you need to be prepared to go into it and give it a fair shot. Even if you come out of it and go, I didn't like what it was doing, you need to have an awareness of what it is doing. And I think that was kind of what that's where I end up with Sarah Kane as well. It's like, it's not for everyone. Horror's not for everyone. Those kinds of plays aren't for everyone. But go in prepared to see what it's trying to do, or at least to give it a kind of good faith attempt. And if you can't do that, then I would say, yeah, you can't really review a film or you can't really criticize it, but you can talk about what it was that made you nope out.
I've sort of got 2 contrasting examples coming to mind. And one of them is the absolutely excellent Troll performance piece, I guess you could say, Watching Paint Dry. Again, if you've been on this channel a while, you've heard me discuss this in the BBFC history sections. And there will be more BBFC history. It is on the way. The next one's probably going to be the one I finish with, and so I'm a bit nervous. Anyway, Watching Paint Dry was submitted in protest to the BBFC because the director had been trying to get films through and objected to having to pay to have his movie censored. He really didn't like the process at all. So he recorded I want to say 7-hour film, literally of paint drying, knowing that the BBFC would have to watch the whole thing.
Well played, man.
Yes, there would have to be at least 2 examiners watching the whole thing, making notes.
Excellent.
And they were sort of committed. They had to see it through. But on the other hand, I'm thinking of the responses to the new wave of long criticism, the kind that Mauler makes, JXC's Doctor Who video. Jay was smart enough to sort of end the thing with, which I should reference is, I think, 4.25 hours long. It's in that region. And Jay just ends it by saying, it's going to be great when people just look at the timestamps and say, there's no way I'm watching that. And in that case, I'm like, yeah, that's unreasonable. You can't dismiss a review just because it's too long for you to watch. But on the other hand, watching paint dry. Is that a meaningful contrast?
Potentially, yeah, I think so.
I liked your framing. I think if we're going to round this off, I like your framing that a rage quit isn't so much a review, but it can be a very valid response.
Yes.
And if a whole bunch of people see what's initially out there and absolutely nope out and say they don't want to go near it, that tells you might be able to get a sort of normative assessment that something is too long, too depressing, too James Corden filled.
Exactly.
All right, sweet. There may be another reason that we raised this particular topic for possession. I wonder if people can think what it is. We are going to go into the film discussion section now. And I will warn you that... Oh, hang on. Let's switch that up. I don't think it makes much difference when it's just you and me, but it's tradition. So there you go. I mean, John Garris, absolutely prime example. That's about what I would want to get paid for that.
But would you watch it forever?
Ugh.
That's not worth it.
Weak. All right. Yeah, before we get into it, let's do the customary YouTube stuff. Thank you, everyone who's watching. Thank you, everyone watching on the replay. I know the majority of people catch this later. And I also know it's about 40% of the people watching this aren't subscribed. So as you would expect me to do, I want this channel to grow, and subbing helps that. We are very much on the way to 3K. And I would love to be at 3K by Christmas. I think that'd be a bit of a delight. So if you are not subscribed, please do click that subscribe button. And for everyone watching on the replay, how are we going to do it this week? Take that like button and smush it into bed with a massive deformed worm creature while that worm creature has its way with the like button. And there's no way we can do this normally.
Use your electric carving knife and slash that subscribe button in its own throat, and then put it through a very 70s mincer.
Absolutely. Oh, wonderful.
Like and subscribe, and don't leave your toddlers alone for 3 weeks with some jam. Hang on.
We got some deep lore here. Rory Herbert. That's awesome. No, you have not mentioned that before. That's really cool. I love it.
Awesome.
Good stuff, Rory. Good stuff.
It's really unsettling when the only two films I'd seen him in prior to watching Saw were The Princess Bride and Robin Hood Men in Tights. And it's quite the tonal shift to go straight from Men in Tights to Saw. I will say that.
Yeah, just a bit, eh? Just a bit.
A very versatile actor.
Quite the contrast. All right. Let's talk possession. And I think I'll just do a little shifting so that works for us. Okay, good. Right. Now, as I've said, and one other thing, we are on YouTube. As I said, the super chats are on. If you want to send a super chat, we will treat them with great dignity and merit. And you can also support the channel as a member, either here or on Subscribestar. If you do that, it helps me fund the more ambitious project I'm working on about the history and cultural impact of Blockbuster. It's something that I've been really looking forward to going a bit deep on. And I think we're kind of close now. So if you want to support via membership, that works best for me because I can work out the funds much more easily. And most importantly, I can reward you. I can give you exclusive content. I can give you behind the scenes stuff, especially I think people quite like all the Easter egg posts where I show all the stuff hidden in the videos. Not that there is anything. That's just a rumor. So yeah, if you want to help me make more ambitious things, or if you just want to show some appreciation, membership is fantastic and it will get you extra content and early access. And I will stop shilling because I'm British and it feels weird to shill. It feels very weird. Okay, let's get into possession. We're going full spoiler mode. So this is a full spoiler review, just so you know, full spoilers for Possession by Andrzej Żuławski from 1981. As we would typically do, we're going to start with the pint of Guinness summary. And I actually have footage of Guinness this time.
Excellent.
So waifu, you're going to give the synopsis for Possession in the time it takes someone to pour a pint of Guinness. Go.
Okay, so in this film, Sam Neill is possibly a spy. He's in East and or West Germany. His marriage is breaking down and his wife wants to leave him. She's having an affair with, they are pouring that way too fast, an affair with a pretentious artsy, effete chap who's probably into tantra and lives with his elderly mum. Every time Sam and his wife chat, it gets super violent and shouty and intense. I think neither of them were fed on set because they're clearly chewing the scenery. There's also lots of visceral body horror, including alarming self-harm scenes with an electric carving knife. It's all very 70s/early 80s. Eventually, the wife walks out and disappears, coming back occasionally to make sandwiches for their child, but she's not at her lover's, so no one entirely knows where she is. That's been sped up, you bugger.
I didn't do it. They did totally cheat on the original. I had trouble finding footage of Guinness being poured.
Anyway, I'm still going, and I maintain that I'm still going at the normal speed for pouring a Guinness. So, your woman's disappeared. She occasionally crops up to make a jam sandwich and throw things at her husband. Sam Neill, I can't remember his actual name in the film, hires a detective to find her. This detective is crap. He would win the most obvious shadowing award because he just makes it so obvious. However, when he rocks up at the flat where the wife is hiding, she lets him in when he pretends to be a building attendant. He makes his way into the flat, where a shadowy, sinister earthworm attacks him in a bathroom. Meanwhile, Sam has the hots for a gentle demure teacher who looks like his wife, but in a bad wig with green contacts.
Waifu, this is terrible.
I'm still going.
All right, I'm going to put some chickens on.
Thank you. I prepared this. It is a more succinct summary, but I wanted to include all the key points. So yes, the detective's gay lover goes to the flat. He also gets earthwormed. By this point, Sam has achieved a state of transcendent chaddish calm, and he tells the wife's lover where she is. So the lover goes, encounters the earthworm, plus some disembodied human bits and bobs in the fridge. He calls Sam. Sam goes to the flat. He sees no earthworm, but he sees the bodies, so he sets up some arson, goes and murders the lover in a toilet, then sets the flat on fire, incriminating the now-dead lover. He heads home, finds his neighbour dead in the lift, for no particular reason. The wife did it. For no other earthly reason, he helps her to hide the body. No one really knows why. He then goes to her new hideout for, again, reasons, where he encounters our earthworm lad almost fully formed. At that point, there is chaos, with more shouting, shooting, and scenery eating.
Mm-hmm.
That's the film.
That's pretty much it. That's definitely what happens. But what did it mean, waifu? What did it mean?
I think it means that the director and everyone involved needed some urgent psychiatric care.
Oh, dear. Okay, folks.
I'll be very interested to see what people in the audience thought of this, because it was not my cup of tea.
People are fond of it, and I can kind of see why. Shall we leave the chicken footage going?
Yes, we should. I still don't understand the significance of the man with pink socks.
Okay. All right. I think before talking about why this film is what it is, let's maybe talk about some basic impressions or how you might approach possession. Does that sound good to you?
Okay, yeah. Do you want to lead off? I'll be distracted by the chicken's fluffy butts.
It is wonderfully distracting footage of the girls. And I think we got some wonderful mochi in a second. So this is made in 1981. You cannot miss the fact that it's actually set in West Germany, which is amazing. It's something I'm possibly a bit biased, but I just find that a really interesting time and place. And I think it's really underexplored in cinema. Mm-hmm. I would love to see a heck of a lot more making use of that. I mean, we did have the Suspiria remake, which made a lot more out of the setting. So that was already interesting. But Possession is a very unique vision. It's a director working in English for, I believe, the first time, possibly the only time. And Andrzej Żuławski had difficulties in Poland because of the official governmental controls that were imposed on cinema. He'd had a few of his works banned and censored. And so effectively, he had been forced out of Poland, and he was actually banned from Poland at the time he made this film. Yeah, it was in the production of making this that he was effectively kicked out of his home country. Now, in terms of vibe, I think maybe it's easier to grasp Possession if we talk about the kind of feeling it's trying to invoke. And it's very much in the model of, I would say, Lynch, early Lynch. So some of the comparisons that get made a lot are Eraserhead. I also drew very clear comparison. Sorry, I should maybe elaborate a bit more. Eraserhead for the surreal nightmare logic that's happening, some of the very gruesome imagery, the concerns around offspring, and so on.
Rory, I need to interrupt for a second to let you know that the large grey fluffy chicken is in fact a chap. That is our rooster Mochi. So they do have a good cock there.
Yeah, look at him.
And
isn't he proud?
He makes his presence felt.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay. I'd also throw in comparisons. I really thought strongly of The Brood. Now, we covered The Brood on this channel before. That's an early David Cronenberg. And I thought of The Brood so much while I was watching this. You've got that sort of semi-real world with a lot of manic energy and surreal imagery in it. And it turns out I'm not the only person, inevitably, I'm not the only person to draw the comparison to Isabella Adjani's performance, which is manic, delirious, maddening, violent and disturbing, and Samantha Eggar's performance in The Brood.
Oh, yeah.
That was the one with the pregnant... Tiny dwarf children produced by a psychotic projecting mother.
That was it.
Yeah. So I got very similar vibes in there, especially the energy. And I was also kind of reminded of, how can I say? It made me think of Hellraiser. Now, of course, this is coming out, I think, 6 years before Hellraiser, but there's certain plot lines that are very Hellraiser-like. So the section where an assortment of random men are being brought to a dilapidated old accommodation to be murdered by a monstrous thing there.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, so I got those Hellraiser vibes and that sort of strong sexual aspect to the horror. But those are just impressions I got. I mean, they really don't help convey what an odd vision possession is.
Yes, there's lots of films where I think it's either referencing or speaking to future films, and I think that's definitely in there. But it was the thing for me that I found challenging, and I found it with other similarly kind of disjointed films, like some of Lynch's work. And I can't think of others, possibly Cronenberg as well, where it's like you don't really know what's actually real. So it's very hard to know what to care about almost. Because, there's a scene quite late on where you see the wife, Isabella, is it Isabella Adjani?
Yeah. Isabella Adjani.
It reminds me of someone I work with, actually. But you see her walking through a tube station and then she suddenly drops her shopping and starts just screaming and rending her clothes and throwing herself against the walls. She's clearly a dancer, or at least has some dance training. She's an incredibly beautiful woman. And does a fantastic job, throws herself all into the performance. But it's just like, why is she having a breakdown in an empty tube station? Why is a tube station in Berlin completely empty in the middle of the day? And just what's going on? And then it kind of cuts to the next scene with not much that happened seemed to have an ongoing impact. Like there was the broader plot points that I covered slightly sarcastically. But then there's lots of moments like that where you're like, this doesn't actually affect what comes next, and this isn't affected by what's just happened. It's just someone doing something shrieky and dramatic.
I can sort of see that. There's a lot of, especially with regards to Isabella Adjani's character. I haven't remembered her name.
Anna.
I know. I'll try. I know Sam Neill is Mark. I never remember the names. You folks know this by now. Now, I know I liked this a fair bit more than you, but I did struggle as well. And I think it is kind of fair to say this will be a difficult film for people to love. I think even with the best will in the world, it is quite difficult to get into. And I think it's not just the it's not just the kind of obscure and oblique meanings, which we are going to get into. We're not just going to say it's weird. We are going to try and interpret this a bit.
Are we?
Oh yeah. Well, I've got some ideas.
I'll get the brandy.
It's also the fact that there is, I'd say, distinct from all the other references we made to Hellraiser, to David Lynch, to Cronenberg. This has something very distinct to it, which is a theatricality. And how can I say, what's the best way to... It's delivered very much like you would expect in a play, where there is an open acknowledgement that what you're seeing is fiction, that people are not speaking in a way that is meant to be entirely realistic. It is meant to be heightened drama. Do you think that's fair?
Yes, I think so. But in some ways that almost makes it harder to engage with, because you're, from my perspective anyway, because I find that kind of emphasis, the way it's emphasizing, this isn't real. This is a dramatization. I find that it makes it harder for me to care, because, certainly when it's done in this kind of way, because it's telling me it's not real. And I'm not saying that I watch Hellraiser and go, oh yes, this is totally 100% literal, but it's more, I've got something to hold on to, whereas this, it felt like there was nothing to hold on to in a way.
Well, a lot of stories, I hope you'd agree, would go into that area of extremely unrealistic drama. But they will try and sort of seduce you with realism to get buy-in, to get suspension of disbelief, so that they can have you relating to characters, that they will then sort of take you on the journey so you can experience the word I'm looking for,
the emotional
cathartically. Thank you.
I think the difference I would say is that even as other films are expecting you to suspend your disbelief, they're giving you characters that you can on some level relate to or engage with, or kind of follow what's happening to them emotionally. Whereas in this film, I felt like I couldn't, because I didn't know how anyone was going to react in any given moment. I didn't know if someone was going to start sort of trashing a load of beautiful mid-century modern furniture, or sort of sit down and have a nice cup of tea. It meant that it was quite hard to sort of engage with, because I couldn't follow the emotional journey of what people were going on in any. There wasn't a sort of coherent emotional journey, I suppose, is what I'm saying. Lots of disjointed scenes in terms of what was happening to them, which meant that took me out of the plot. Whereas perhaps it would have been a less sort of conceptually interesting film if it had a bit more emotional realism, even if sort of easier to follow but less interesting, perhaps, is what I'm saying, or easier to connect to, even if less interesting.
Yeah, part of the joy will be in, I guess, in trying to unpick the puzzle. Victoria's raised a comparison here, Antichrist. Yeah, I was also thinking kind of The Lighthouse, Robert Eggers' The Lighthouse. Now, we didn't like that either,
no.
Unfortunately. It's one of those ones I wanted to like.
I know.
I thought I would love it. But there's
a nice suggestion, wasn't it?
There's an aspect here. For people who aren't familiar with Antichrist, one of the things that's very present is that you're not so much seeing characters, you're seeing symbols. So correct me if I'm wrong, the male character is just called the man, and the female character is just the woman.
I've never seen it.
Okay. Many people will not have. So
I know it's got some quite gruesome bits and bobs.
Yeah, that level is just there to say you are dealing with symbols, not characters. We're not really at that level with this, but you're very consciously aware that things are abnormal and working on a very different level. But at the same time, there is fun in that you've got obvious things to unpick. It's not random images. A lot of people criticize Eraserhead as just being random. Actually, I have a bit I'd quite like you to. Oh, crikey! Sorry, I nearly knocked the computer over. If people were wondering what that was, I thought maybe if we went back to Kim Newman's Nightmare movies to read what he wrote about Żuławski, which starts here. So this is in a chapter on the weirdo horror film, after he's written about Lynch a fair amount.
Okay. The least appetizing kitsch films are not badly made or in poor taste, but pretentious. And yet, personally, I like Andrzej Żuławski's, apologies for that, Possession more than Eraserhead. Żuławski takes his film too seriously, but it's fun all the same. Mark, Sam Neill, is a secret agent at the dreaded beck and call of his paranoia movie superior, the man with pink socks. He is distracted from his spying by personal problems. Not only has his wife Anna, Isabella Adjani, taken a trendy lover, but she has also spontaneously generated a tentacled monster in a subway town. Samantha Egger acts in an equally unlikely reproductive manner in The Brood, but Adjani goes further by having an affair with her beastie. Żuławski goes mad with his swooping camera, has everything in shot painted blue, and encourages his stars to attack their roles with a kind of stylized hysteria rare outside the Japanese theatre. But Possession is compulsive all the same.
That's pretty much all of it.
Yeah, that feels like a pretty accurate summary of the film. So the bit in the subway where she's having that meltdown is maybe a flashback to the tentacle thing being born? Because I think the worm had appeared before then, but he describes it as she's spontaneously generated a tentacled monster in a subway tunnel.
I'm not as sure about that. I'm not as sure about that interpretation, but it is up for interpretation. And this is, how can I say? I don't think it's going to be like Mulholland Drive, where we're able to say, think of this film as a story told from the perspective of one character, but that character is lying to herself and doing wish fulfillment. And think about what story that person would tell themselves to work out what's going on. We can do that for Mulholland Drive. I don't think we can do that for this, but I think we can point out that there is a sort of logic to this. There is a series of concerns and themes and sources of fears that run through this movie that can be revealing.
There's an interesting point which you pointed out, which was that Żuławski's wife had cheated on him and their marriage had broken down possibly shortly before the film was made. And so it sort of featured, there are elements of his experience with that kind of marital breakdown that feature in the film. Things like this really rather heartbreaking scene where the Mark has been away on a bender for clearly quite a long time and comes back and finds the flat in chaos and his little boy just sort of mucky and alone eating some jam out of a jar and just sort of trying to fend for himself, and his mum has just vanished and hasn't been around for a while, and he's just been abandoned by both his parents.
Yeah, if I may, I think that's a really good way to start our way in, is thinking about Possession as highly autobiographical. So this incident here, as you said, that this actually happened. Żuławski's kid was in the care of his soon-to-be ex-wife, and he'd come back to find that the kid had been left alone, neglected, and was literally there covered in jam and had been trying to fend for himself but not knowing how. So he's obviously drawing on real life there and real horror. He was, as we've alluded to, he was going through a divorce at the time. And he has these characters basically having nightmarish fears spring from the marriage falling apart. Not only so, we got that divorce aspect. We also have that Żuławski was effectively divorced from his homeland. So, and he sets this film in West Germany. Right, it's not a coincidence. It's not like, oh, it's easy to get from Poland to West Germany. I'll film it there. He sets it right next to the wall. He has Die Mauer right there. Everyone
Height.
can see it. You know, the flat is literally next to the wall. This is not an accident. He has done this for visuals and for themes. So this is maybe a good jumping off point. There is a deep vein of fear of separation running through this film. So much of the plot, so much of the horror is about things being torn away.
And I suppose there's also an element there in terms of the symbolism of the wall in the film, perhaps, of kind of, things being kind of, things that should be safe and should be homely are divided and made strange and kind of made sort of disrupted. It's quite a sort of, the wall in itself, though static, is a kind of violent, sort of constant reminder of an invasion, essentially. And so it's a sense of, the whole, the city itself is kind of disrupted and turned on itself. Yeah,
it's a very visual separation. I think I do have an image of it here. Got it, right. It's not the clearest image. You do see other clear images of the wall. But I'll just get that up there while we talk so you can see. So the wall is...
Samuel looks a bit like my dad in this shot.
I can kind of see it. I can see it. So the wall is this physical barrier, physical separation. It's also a visual barrier. You'd have to be up on high to see it, but even so much is blocked out from view. You just didn't know what was happening in the other half of your homeland.
Yeah.
If you're a German at the time, okay? Now, one of the big fears that Mark has is that he just doesn't know where his wife goes. She just disappears. So the wall is echoing that. It's a physical separation and it's a lack of knowledge. But even so, this is not accidental. We're already able to unpick. I did see that chat, you were talking about the green eyes. Victoria and John talking about green eyes. I think that's significant. I've got a different take on it, but I will cover that when we start talking about, I'm going to call it Earthworm Grim. And I'm going to be the only person who likes that joke, but I'm going to keep doing it.
Don't get it.
That's okay. Don't worry. You know Destiny's Child, though, right? Don't leave me hanging.
Not really.
Oh my gosh. Right. So that's interesting. Victoria. Yeah. I just think it's completely underexplored in cinema. Like, I've looked out for it, and I've only just seen like a handful of films, and a lot of them are like Hollywood. So there was that Steven Spielberg one that just, I don't know, very weak. Margarete von Trotter, I liked her stuff a bit more about it. Anyway, I'll try not to get sidetracked, but that is super interesting. So we're talking about separation. So a lot of the film is driven by, there is a direct comment on the wall as well that I think is interesting, because they try and take it beyond that basic level of separation, lack of knowledge. They talk about the fear being of two worldviews, a fear of too much freedom and a fear of too much restriction. And those are those two approaches to the world obviously are represented by, in the, general narrative, let's say.
Yeah.
The West is a super liberal, free and easy, loosey-goosey version. And the East, over the other side of the wall, is a super restrictive, authoritarian one that curbs everything you can do. In the film, obviously, Mark is more restrictive. He is more of the government. He wants the control.
He's the secret police.
He is, very much so. I mean, he's not identified as that, but he's doing a spy role. His wife, on the other hand, is sort of out free and doing her own thing.
Were the Stasi East Germany?
Yeah. Yeah, the Staatssicherheitspolizei, or Stasi, were in the East.
So is there an implication that he's Stasi?
No, I don't think so. I think he's very much going to be an American trying to
Oh, of course,
work
because he's
across.
British. Well,
Well,
not.
I think he's from New Zealand, actually.
The actor is, yeah.
Yeah.
I was sorry. In my head, the film was in German, even though we watched it in English. So I just immediately translated him as a German character.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you, the spy side of things isn't something I've put a lot of thought on. I kind of mentally wrote that storyline off. It wasn't something that made much sense to me and didn't seem to impact the plot as much, but I'm sure there is deeper stuff going on there. I very much felt like this thing of very early on, like basically the first scene, and we get this warning about the man in pink socks who turns up at the very end. And I'll be honest, I felt that was more like the director just having a joke. It felt very much like a Lynchian joke where Lynch will very obviously just mess with the audience for no reason. The log lady in Twin Peaks is a good example of that. She's consciously absurd. She's consciously trolling the viewer, and she is there to basically have a bit of a joke at you. And I felt the man with pink socks was similar, just because of how absurd it was and how over the top, how you just could not miss it.
Yeah.
But
72, the movie is in English and was filmed in English, but it was set in
West Germany.
Yeah. So yeah, so in my head, because we were talking about West Germany, I'd just then immediately gone, well, of course it was in German, which isn't how language works.
Yeah. By the way, good to see you, Crow Minion. Yeah, we actually have a music stand that says "Made in West Germany" here. It is really bizarre how I just kind of feel like that whole thing was memory hold. Obviously,
it is from our perspective.
Yeah, I mean,
Eastern Europe is a very different feeling.
Well, yeah, working in Germany is like you still had to pay the extra Steuer, the extra tax to effectively. It was a reparations fund for the East to build them up. It's kind of a point of contention when I was over there, you know, because they'd say like, oh, it was so long ago. Why are we still paying extra tax to build up the East?
Even when you were there?
Yeah.
Good Lord.
Yeah. And you can imagine if you're in the East, do you want that extra money going away?
No.
Heck no. So yeah, minor point of contention, but I just feel like it's basically, it just doesn't get attention on our side of things anymore. So yeah. Yeah. Devlin, bless you. We said a lot of people would really struggle with this, and
I'm with you, Devlin. I'll be honest with you.
I'm not blaming anyone who didn't enjoy this, and it's fine. This film is a very unique vision, and what we've seen so far is that a lot of people seem to really love it, or they absolutely hated it. This does happen when something is very non-standard. You're going to have that. What I'm hoping is over the course of the stream, maybe we can get you appreciating it a bit more. Instead of like, I'd like to move people from that was bloody awful, stupid trash. Not your exact words, but I like to move them to, okay, that film was doing something kind of weird but interesting. I hated it though. That's where I'd like to move people along to. Is basically a replay of this fight I've been having constantly ever since I made a video on Midsummer. Like, look, so many people saying, oh yeah, I love it. I love that symbolism you pointed out. I get it now. Yeah, that's awesome. But most of the comments are like, no, it was boring crap. I hated it. It's just shite. That's me quoting them. I wouldn't swear. This is a family-friendly stream, of course.
It's one of those things where I think, I think you can find something dull, tedious, and frustrating. Like we're saying sort of at the start with the like, is a Ragequit a review? And I think it's very fair to just like, absolutely not for me, did not enjoy it, found it tedious, shrieky, and they needed to eat something that was a sandwich rather than the scenery. For example, that could be one's review. But it's the kind of, you know, you can have a negative opinion of it, but I think at the same time it's like, clearly it was doing something that wasn't working for me. And if everyone watches it and goes, yeah, it didn't work for me, then maybe it's a crowd film. But if like 20% of the people who watch it are like, bloody love that was awesome, and 80% of them are like, why? Then, you know, there's something there, I guess. I don't know. I'm rabbiting.
No, I think that's absolutely fair. And I would much rather have a lot more films that are incredibly divisive, that have, you know, 5% of the audience are giving it 12 out of 12 burgers. And the other 95% think it's the worst thing around. But, you know, if you have 20 of those movies and they all hit different 5%, I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, and it's more interesting.
So, I don't know, maybe do you want to keep unpicking it a little bit more, or talking to, because there are people talking about their responses to how it just felt watching it, and maybe that's an interesting thing to go on, or should we keep unpicking a bit more?
I think go into sort of how it felt, because I don't necessarily know how much I have to say on the symbolism of it, I'll be very honest with you. I think I could come up with some complete sort of English literature degree BS that sounds compelling, but I don't know. Yeah.
Okay, well, tell you what, I'll give us a little lead in. And by the way, folks, if you haven't smashed the like already, that would be much appreciated. We like our like button smashed around here. That's just how we do things. It's how my father did it. It's how my grandfather did it. And I want to carry on that tradition of smashed likes. So I'll lead into the experience by saying that we've talked about how this is a bit of an examination of the desire to sort of control for security and the desire to be totally free. And really interestingly, Żuławski is not giving you the standard Western line, because he doesn't present being free and liberated as just being awesome, double thumbs up, all good. He presents freedom as a threat. So threat, even if you want to pronounce it properly. So 70 Sue. Oh yeah, that's Sam Neill. We love our Sam Neill.
That's one of those things I'm looking forward to having small children around to give me an excuse to watch Jurassic Park again, because my memory of Sam Neill in that is this quite sort of reserved, relatively, I might have not been paying attention to the film, but he seems like a relatively sensible actor. And then the other films I've seen since then of him, things like Event Horizon, this, and I'm trying to think of some, and The Omen 3.
The Omen 3 Final Conflict. That was pretty close to this.
The dude is a lunatic as an actor. He just goes all in and completely mad.
I'll throw this one out there. Any Brits remember Sam Neill's wonderful film Sirens? I'm sure you definitely remembered that film for Sam Neill and Hugh Grant's excellent performance. That was what you remembered from the film Sirens. Right, guys? Okay.
What would they actually remember?
What? Oh, the performances, the music, the lighting. Yeah. Anyway, moving on.
Did they make out?
What? No.
Did they?
What? No. Anyway, so.
Okay, so what's the bit that people would remember? Spoil it for me.
It's the bit where they dig down and ruin the joke by digging. That's what works.
No, but I've got a shovel and I need to use it.
It's a film that gosh darn it, a film that aimed to be very artistic in the way that copious nudity can provide.
It is very artistic.
Had a lot of models of the day. Al McPherson, I seem to recall.
I feel like this film could have done with more artistic.
There's quite a lot of nudity in this.
Mima, I'd forgotten that he was Merlin.
Oh gosh.
And there was that bent with the fish round her neck.
Ooh.
Oh, that's thrown me back. I think that was a TV series that I was definitely too young to watch.
Was it one where he was like in the present day and he's remembering back or something?
kind of not really, no.
Oh,
So it's Arthurian. He's Merlin. There's a certain amount of like time jumping. Yeah, it was a mini series, and there's a certain amount of kind of jumping around in time. And oh bugger, what's her name? So yeah, he's so it follows the kind of Arthurian legends and the kind of breakdown of Camelot and stuff, but it's from Merlin's perspective and how he gets sort of trapped and tricked by Morgan Le Fay. And there's a thing where the woman he's in love with ends up in this kind of fairyland, and because he has to leave to go and help Arthur, he ends up being trapped and he can never go back to her, and it's all very sad. And I can't remember her name, but it was great.
I've got vague memories of this.
I had forgotten that was him.
Interesting.
Sorry, anyway, I've just ruined your joke and I've just gone off on a tangent about Arthurian legends.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry. No one remembered sirens either, so it's all fine. So, yeah, we're talking about the very interesting Żuławski doesn't just show Western liberal total freedom is the best response. He shows the dangers of both responses of the, you have the fear of loss, so you either go super freedom, run away, or you go total restriction control. He shows both those responses as being flawed. Now, how that actually impacts on the film is that you spend a lot of the film seeing Isabella Adjani and Sam Neill have these massive domestic rows that are really quite upsetting. I'm trying to find one of the photos I've got of. There we go.
Is Isabella Adjani British?
Oh, I don't think so. No.
Why did I get it in my head?
I think she's. I don't know. Does anyone tell you what, chat? We require you to do research because we only have one screen. What's Isabella Adjani's early life? Just let us know. What's the background? French, Italian? We'd love to know. Anyway. It's incredibly intense. These scenes get more and more intense, violent, and manic. Anna is just having a full-on breakdown. It's an absolutely... I think Crow Minion said earlier it was exhausting.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah. Oh, there we go. I think that's a good one. Distressing. You're so constantly confronted with these characters without much of a break that it is, I think, very exhausting. It's very distressing. It's very difficult. I know I talked about this last week, folks, so forgive me, but I watched Possum from 2019 recently, and that really impressed me. I think it was a great film. I'm not going to watch it again for ages because I found it traumatic. It was similarly just very relentlessly distressing, and without even the odd moments of comedy that this film gives you, because it does just throw you in some really odd tangents that make you think you're being trolled. But yeah, these just it is just a lot. It's very intense. I mean, everyone involved in it seemed to have found the production incredibly exhausting. Żuławski talked about having basically a mental breakdown afterwards. Sam, I mean, he had a lot going on as well. He had his divorce. He was kicked out of Poland, as we talked about.
Yes, Gatsby.
Hello. We were wondering when... Folks, pats for Gats in the chats.
Anyone who's new on stream, that noise is our cat. He is 18 and a half and has strong opinions.
He is wonderful. Yeah, Sam Neill said, he was talking about it, he said it was brilliant. I would never do that again. I would never do anything like that again. Isabella Adjani seemed to talk about, I mean, it really taking quite a toll on her. I mean, someone's referenced, 70 Sue. Yeah, she does look a bit like Shelley Duvall. I mean, The Shining was made in 1980, and the outfit and look is rather similar. And of course, Shelley Duvall was basically given a breakdown by Stanley Kubrick's rather
forthright,
demanding style. And I think you can obviously see echoes of that in just how energetic she has to give this performance. But I mean, I was reading into it, and it was Żuławski recounting a tale that Adjani had told, that basically she had nearly been driven to self-forever sleep.
Oof.
Like she had almost attempted a self-deletion.
Good Lord.
Now I haven't seen her reporting that. I've seen Żuławski reporting that. But either way, let's just say definitely you can tell that she would be absolutely broken by this. I'll go to that famous scene that we talked about earlier. Okay. Finding a screenshot that I could share of this was difficult. This is a scene that we talked about earlier, where she has effectively a breakdown in the subway. By the way, hello, Mr. Gently Benevolent. Oi, oi.
Mr.
Good to see you.
Benevolent, you're forgiven for plan number 9. I'd rather watch that again than this.
Yeah. I saw some interesting chats and interpretations about this. I think John Gorse, did you say this is her sort of aborting the first incarnation of the worm? All right, Gatsby, come on, mate.
He's very pro-life.
Yeah, so this scene, tell you what, I've talked for ages. Do you want to describe what happens in this scene?
I think this is the scene that I described earlier. She's leaving, she's walking through an empty tube station, and then sort of, has a breakdown. She sort of flings her shopping against the wall, and starts kind of throwing herself against the walls and sort of screaming, sort of tossing herself around. Stuff starts sort of seeping out of her mouth and then sort of out of her skin, and
it's kind of a not only do you have this sort of white substance coming out of her mouth like
blood.
Vomit, you get blood, you get a sort of what looks like a pus. It's like this, it's like she's a massive cyst that is just burst and leaking. It is, I mean, this is after sort of a few minutes of her having an absolute manic episode, throwing herself around, throwing herself against the walls. It just escalates and escalates and escalates for so long. And then you're just feeling like, you mentioned, like it's not just chaos. She's got a kind of dancer's energy in there. And
it's very graceful whilst also gross.
Yeah, she's improvising as well. But she's also just like rolling around, and you feel like you can just see how much it's taking out of her. Now, Żuławski did 2 takes of this at about 5 a.m. And he said after that, that's enough. That's all we're doing. But it's sort of, my gosh, that's a lot of work. And you can just see why she had so much trouble after this, because this is a performance that's clearly taking so much out of her.
For sure.
I mean, you got to respect that.
She's really dead. I mean, that's the thing that I would say about this film, is that however frustrating I found it, not kind of, it's clearly not for me. I'm one of the sort of however many people who didn't love it. But the performances that people are giving, they're just going completely all in. Particularly her and Sam Neill. And it's, as you say, it's sort of not like anything. It's a very unusual film. It's not like anything I've really seen before. It just doesn't work for me.
Yeah. I will just mention that. Victoria, thank you so much for the super sticker. That is much appreciated. Thank you. It's good to see you. I hope you're enjoying the stream. And I think you mentioned earlier that you got to see you're getting tips for films that you would never have watched otherwise. I love hearing that. All right, Gatsby. I love to hear that. I mean, this was a discovery for me as well. Hard going, but I think it's not something I'm going to rewatch in a hurry, but it's something I've ended up respecting. So, thank you again, Victoria. That's much appreciated. I kind of want to move on a little more to Earthworm Grimm, as I'm going to call it. Shall I go?
wish I knew what that was a reference to.
I'm throwing that out there for the Gen Xers. Okay. Yeah, I struggle with the symbolism of this. Some of the symbolism is a lot more obvious. So Mark basically comes apart, and you see his response is to become more domineering. The possession in the title is not just her being possessed by otherworldly impulses or some kind of demonic worm spirit. It's more than that. It's about his response to try and possess, to try and hold. I have an image here that I think shows you there's a few examples of this kind of thing where you just get a visual clue to what's going on. But again, it's kind of a puzzle.
Yeah.
So what you're seeing on screen there is just after he's come back and found his child abandoned, left to fend for itself and smearing itself with jam. Himself with jam. He takes the kid's top off to clean him. So he's in a very fatherly role. And then he just sort of holds a child like that. And my instinct for that is basically it's a kind of move for security. He's just realizing how fragile the child is. And he's thinking like how fragile his marriage has just come apart. His marriage was fragile. And now he's seeing how sort of fragile his child is. So he just grabs him. He realizes I can take this kid in two hands. But then later, I'm trying to remember if it's the wife or the clone. Oh yeah, there are clones in this. Maybe.
I think it's the wife.
Okay, the wife comes back and he has a scene where we get basically the same angle. I think, in my interpretation of this, he holds her this same way because he's also trying to just possess her. He's trying to see her like a child that he can have ownership over.
For sure.
But weirdly, and you pointed this out, and once you'd pointed it out, I kept seeing it. It's actually Mark far more often who is infantilized. So I'll get you one image of this. So I think the first time you pointed it out was when we saw a scene in the kitchen where...
oh, yes, of course.
Yeah, the kid was in the child's chair in the kitchen with Anna there. And then that scene, after a mere few minutes later... All right, Gatsby.
Shall I shut the door?
We might have to. Gatsby is not always a polite contributor. Sorry. So a few minutes later, after we've seen the boy in the kid's chair in the kitchen, we see Mark sitting in basically the same chair from the same angle, made to look tiny. We also, I only noticed it when I was getting the images, but we have a really early clue on about Mark being depowered. It's not quite a sort of neutered thing, but it is a man who's depowered. His wife has just left him for another man. He's got no control of the situation. So basically this early scene, we see him placed in a chair that looks a lot like a wheelchair. And he spends so much time in a chair like that, rocking back and forth, just almost immobilized, you could say. And
I think it's just a fairly common design of rocking chair, but that's my wine, put it back down.
Oh, sorry, wrong glass.
Possession. But
Possession. Possession.
Anyway, so because I think possibly if you've seen that kind of chair a lot, you wouldn't have that same response that we did. But yeah, the first time I saw it, I thought it was a sort of old school wheelchair. But yeah, he's sort of limited, held in, frozen in it in a way.
Yeah, he becomes immobilized. He has a sort of drinking binge where he puts himself out of it. And he also sort of does what you might call So it would be a displacement, I think. Sorry, folks, I've been researching ego defenses. So I might not be 100% right on this, but I think he does a displacement tactic. So there is a character who's rather odd. She's a woman in a cast. She has a foot in a cast. She's a friend of the wife, and she's often called on to look after their child while both of them are away. And he kind of has a displacement response when she's over. He absolutely hates this woman, but when she stays over, he closes the door on her and then comes back in. It's almost like he's considered it. He's gone away, and then on impulse, he's sort of come back in to basically, how can I say, to conquer the woman in the marital bed. Like, the wife's gone, the wife has left, he can't control her, but there's a woman in the bed that he can control. And even though he's made it clear he hates her,
he still wants that control and that dominance.
Yeah, he's trying to cope through I would say it's a displacement activity. Psychologists, psychiatrists in the chat, I apologize if I'm mangling this. It's new knowledge for me, and I need to do more reading. But one aspect...
I relented, and now I regret it.
Now you regret it. Oh, Gatsby, yes. Free Gatsby I'm seeing. Oppression of Gatsby has been alleged. No, he's loving it. He's getting his chin ruffled right now. So this is...
I may not be able to talk much because I'm attending to the cat.
Okay, so the reason I'm sort of going into this is this film may seem really weird and opaque, but you can start to unpick the logic behind it and understand what's happening. There's another aspect with colour theory that I don't always go for very much, but we might talk about it. All right, TCG, good to see you, mate. Good to see you, welcome. All right, now people have referenced it earlier, so I'm really glad you talked about it. I'm going to go back to it. Following on from our theory that a lot of this is about a man's horror of completely losing control and desperately trying to get a hold on the situation that is rapidly becoming bizarre and nightmarish. We have the worm creature. Massive spoilers again. Obviously, I'm not going to show everything with this thing because it's quite... I don't think YouTube wants me showing a lot of what happens with this, but I'm going to show you the worm. We're going to get the old worm out for the lads.
No.
So it's... You know what? There's something I didn't mention, but it's really early on. Do you remember this? It just starts with the cast list in possession, and it's just doing directed by, written by, and then it says effects for the creature by.
Yes.
And I thought that was absolutely fascinating because right from about a minute into the movie, I'm just thinking,
there's a creature.
What's the creature? And they keep you waiting.
What's the creature, precious?
Yeah. I've sat 90 minutes into this movie, 80 minutes in, and I'm wondering, what will stop Gatsby? Will it blend? I'm wondering. We do love him, really. Oh, Bilbo. Every time. Absolutely worms out for Harambe. I think we're 80 minutes into the film before our worm boy turns up, before we see the creature.
It's quite a long way, and the first glimpse you have of him is kind of in the background of a bathroom. It's quite dark, and you don't really see him properly.
Yeah.
It takes quite a long time before you properly see. Yeah, so your first shot of him is just in a corner, kind of oozing, and you're aware that there's something there, but you can't really see it. And then the detective's boyfriend then arrives at the flat, and that's when you have your first kind of clearer shot of him. And the other thing, yes, that people were mentioning the green eyes earlier, and the other thing that we thought of, and I don't know if English isn't your native language, if there are people in the chat for whom that's the case, but there's a saying like the green-eyed monster, meaning to be jealous of someone. So feeling green about something is to be jealous. And so we wondered if the green eyes were, you know, linking to that idea of, in some ways, the worm is a creation of Mark's own jealousy, a kind of distorted version of himself, or of this sort of this monstrous other lover who is stealing his wife from him.
Yeah, because I mean, we can actually bring back a little bit of the Mulholland Drive analysis and thought process. If you are Andrzej Żuławski, you're writing a horror deeply inspired by your marriage breaking apart. You know your wife has taken another lover. Now,
She has, Gatsby. She has, and I'm left to deal with the fallout.
the initial lover that Żuławski gives her is Heinrich, right? Kind of this bizarre Euro gay figure. It's quite wonderful. He's incredibly camp. I think he's meant to be very bisexual. It's a really bizarre scene that I thought had a sort of Twin Peaks vibe. Mark goes to confront Heinrich, and Heinrich is basically just disarms him by hitting on him.
Yes.
It's one of the weirdest scenes. If Heinrich is one of the weirdest
He
characters
hits on
in
him
here.
and then beats him up, and you're like, what?
Well, I think it's because Mark is feeling completely emasculated. So,
and he's also dressing in a very kind of, and that's one of the things I noticed in the film, is that at the start he's quite sort of buttoned up. He looks very British, even if he isn't, and slightly kind of namby-pamby, which is a phrase that we should bring back. He's very sort of a bit sort of poncy, is your boy Mark, in these sort of sweaters and shirts. And then by the end of the film, he's much more kind of loosey-goosey, much more Chad energy in a t-shirt and quite tight-fitting trousers. And he just looks a lot more masculine and a lot more sort of self-confident in the way he's dressing and presenting himself. But yes, by this point in the film, he's quite broken down. He's got very kind of beta energy. And yeah, as John Gores has said, it's hard not to like Heinrich. He's a very kind of live and let whatever. He's just completely chilled out. And I sort of joked in my 3-minute summary, which I timed, and it was just around 3 minutes. So screw your Guinness pints. He's the kind of guy that, like, what was it? There was something I saw on Twitter of someone complaining that their ex's new partner was into tantric or into tantra, that kind of thing. He's very much kind of, you're in touch with his sensuality. So it's interesting that this is the first lover that Żuławski presents Mark with.
Yeah, I mean, as we said, we're talking about what kind of horror do you write for your own perspective. So first he's seeing Mark is a really uptight guy. So what's horrific for him? Why is his wife left him? Why would she do that? Well, because she wants someone loosey-goosey, free and easy, romantic, poetic, a little flamboyant, everything he's not. That's how he understands why she's left him.
Yeah.
He can understand that if Heinrich is basically the opposite of him. But then the horror is kind of coming in from the fact that Heinrich is completely unintimidated, is just hitting on him, and then actually overpowers him. When Mark loses it and tries to attack Heinrich decks him, okay? Completely dominates him. So he's humiliated. And then after that, there's a kind of darker horror of actually, no, it can't be Heinrich. It's so much worse. As the separation horror escalates, the lover, the real lover, has to be worse. And that's why the real lover has to be monstrous, which is why we end up with the worm demon. I could be completely wrong, guys, but this is how I'm understanding the symbology here. And that's how we end up with the worm demon. Obviously, worm, pretty phallic, and green eyes, the green-eyed monster, as we said, jealousy. This is really feeding off jealousy. We've mentioned Hellraiser because obviously this is very similar to the Hellraiser plotline where the character Claire is bringing back a string of random dudes under the pretense of seducing them so that she can kill them and feed them to the monster that is Frank Cotton. This isn't quite like that, but you do see the vibe of it. And I think someone said earlier, there's no way that Clive Barker didn't watch this and get inspired. The monster doesn't kill anyone. She does all the killing.
Yeah, the monster's just there to shag.
The monster's sort of incidental.
The monster's kind of got Monchi vibes.
She talks very early on about like being in bed with it all night. So, you know, she's established that, but it is a fair bit of a while we wait until inevitably they show us that. I am not showing you that on screen. You know my policy, chat. If there is a big moment, I generally will not show it because I want you to enjoy it. It should be seen and enjoyed in the context of the full film.
It's very,
and also Susan would nuke me.
It's very Japanese.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. When that happens, it's like the film is turning Japanese. Like, I really think so. But beyond that, there's something else that happens with this thing. Ultimately, we do see that it is developing each time. We'll move now into the, I suppose I should say also, there's some early on very heavy dialogue about the only thing you should fear is God. I think, is it Heinrich says, the only thing you should fear is God. And then Mark says, God is a disease.
Yes. I don't really know what to make of that, to be honest.
Folks, if you want to say we're half-arsing it, I will forgive you. It's that kind of speech that makes you write a full-on drama essay. It's a kind of, we could really try and dissect absolutely everything. I will suffice to say that these statements are said, and we then see this creature in the context of an absolutely filthy, diseased-looking apartment. And I will leave people to do their own dissections. I hope we have unpicked a fair amount of the puzzle. But I want to kind of continue on the line of thought we were on, because that's very relevant to what ultimately happens with this creature.
Okay.
Now, we get to that via the film weirdly suddenly turning into American Psycho, which was not what I expected.
Yes.
Yeah, we're skipping over a lot of the things that happen because ultimately we want to talk about the substance and the messaging, the themes of this. And there's so much that we would be doing a 4-hour stream if we went bit by bit. So you know how we do it. We're hoping to give you an appreciation of things.
I will need you at some point to make Harrian watch it and give you a 5-minute review.
There's Harrian. We could get Harrian to say how long it was until he noped out.
Yeah.
I think that would be fair.
Yeah. I mean, if he could do like a sort of voice notes, sort of not quite a live watch along, but just every few minutes do a voice note about what he thinks about what's going on up until the point he nopes out. And then you just collect them all together, edit them into a short stream.
Oh my gosh, now I really want that. Oh, that's such a good idea. Okay. What the heck did I just say about American Psycho?
The film suddenly turns into American Psycho.
Yeah, I think that's not unfair. So I'm very unsure whether any of this stuff is meant to have happened in reality. We get into a weird bit where let's skip over a lot of nonsense and just say basically we are in denouement time. We are heading towards the finale. Basically, he is reunited with his wife. I mean, maybe I'll just say shortly, he goes to where the monster is and he doesn't see a monster. He's basically had...
He really does.
When he goes to the apartment, he doesn't see the monster.
When he goes to the first apartment she's in, he doesn't see the monster.
Yeah. Hello,
he doesn't,
Gatsby.
You weren't watching that bit.
Yeah, I read that as it's the kind of thing like he has had a big change of heart. He has sort of embraced the chaos by the time he goes to the apartment. And so he literally doesn't see a monster because he's seeing things her way. He's got that slightly manic now, slightly ethereal, otherworldly way of thinking that she has. They've both got the same kind of mania, which is why they're able to reconnect and absolutely pound that kitchen linoleum into next week. They go at it like WWE Raw.
I feel like I missed that bit.
Yeah, they get back together violently on the kitchen. Yeah, seriously. Anyway,
Somehow that passed me by.
suffice to say, they've reconnected.
But yeah, then they've reconnected after she's murdered their friend and neighbor and babysitter.
Details.
Which is when it gets a bit American Psycho, because he's then just like, sure, okay, we'll help you hide the body. That's cool. I'm on it.
Yeah.
But then he goes into like her follow-up hideout, which is this sort of house on the corner here. And that's when he sees the earthworm in full tentacular glory.
Yeah. Suffice to say,
You like that phrase?
Yeah, we will skip over the specific details, but basically the characters would need to reunite at another place because police have showed up on the scene. He basically hijacks a taxi driver who is really, really happy to crash his taxi into the police cars. They have a bit of a shootout out of nowhere, and then the police cars start exploding. And it really made me think of American Psycho and the bit where Patrick shoots at the police cars and they explode. And he looks at his gun and are like, there's no way that should have worked. One of the best bits in that film. I absolutely love it. But we do, it's just that element of weird surrealness in how the taxi driver is so pleased to crash his car into the police.
Yes.
Anyway, it's a really weird moment in a really weird film, and it feels like a tone change, but suffice. But moving on from that, we ultimately go to a rushed new location. The police have followed them, and the police effectively shoot them, but we see the final form of the worm. And it is inevitably this. It's your boy Mark, but better.
Chad Mark.
He is absolutely messy, bleeding at this point. He's scruffy. So his wife turns up looking basically perfect with another version of him, a better, cleaner version of him. I don't know what Żuławski did at this point, but Sam Neill looked non-human. He looked uncanny when we first see him as his, I guess, worm form,
Yes.
Mark.
Yeah, he looks odd. He looks kind of very disconnected from the world, very kind of out of it. And yeah, sort of quite mesmeric. And you see later in the scene, Worm Mark needs to get away from the police, and he just sort of talks to a woman in a flat and basically persuades her to help him escape. And she just sort of does it without, like he literally climbs on top of her to get to a skylight. And she's, there are police shooting, and she's just like, yeah, sure, I'll just bend down and let you climb on me. So he's clearly got some sort of compelling power. And whether it was makeup and lighting and things, or whether it was just Sam Neill looking calm, which was unsettling, it might have just been Sam Neill looking sort of relaxed.
Yeah, it's just enough after the absolute mania he's been throwing on the screen for the last 10 minutes. I found it very striking. We don't know much about this. This creature may in fact be immune to bullets, but does still want someone to stop the police shooting it. So maybe not. It's just very mysterious. But in terms of unpacking the film, if you are carrying on with our reading about this being Żuławski's personal fears, if your wife is leaving you, what is your ultimate fear, actually? It's not Heinrich. It's not some monstered creature. If she leaves you for basically just a better version of you, isn't that the worst thing? Like, this idealized version of him is showing up in contrast because he must think he is the worst version of him. He has failed himself because there's something that's just like him that she wanted. It's almost saying like he's let himself down. He hasn't lived up to his potential, and that is why he has lost her.
Ooh, harsh. I like it.
It's all about the reading. Like I say, I get people looking at this movie and saying, this is crazy nonsense. What the heck happens? None of this makes sense. Why is Heinrich dancing like he's on E the second time we see him? You know? However, you can unpick it. You can think about the logic. Unfortunately, the Henriette, is that true? Oh, there's a director's commentary on Possession on YouTube. It's about a woman possessed not living in the reality of the communist regime. It's very possible. I think Death of the Author. Death of the Author? I think Death of the Author.
I think our reading is better.
Yeah, I like our, screw this Żuławski guy. I think we've got the better take on this.
We know what we're doing.
It's very possible that there is a multi-layered interpretation from this. I mean, there's no way that he did it on just one thing, and I'd be kind of interested to hear that. I don't know if I can face watching it again very soon, because it is a very exhausting film.
Oh, someone else has pointed out, John Gorris has pointed out that to an extent, Mark 2.0 is more like a perfect version of Mark and Heinrich.
Oh, I suppose, yeah.
He's a
more feminine, open shirt, like Heinrich always did.
Yeah, more stylish, calmer, more settled in himself, but sort of still with the good looks and refined, newly Chad energy of Mark, I guess.
There's a nice reading.
It's sort of like, no way could Mark compete with that. It's the sort of the best of the two lovers.
Now there's a just after this we get a little bit more, and you and I were a little confused on this. In fact, I think we had different takes on this. There's a character we haven't mentioned much.
My take on it, I'll be honest, was just, thank God the film's nearly over. Why is this scene lasting so long? However,
your interpretation is valid. So there's a character we haven't talked about much, which is, it's kind of a wonderful foreshadowing of the end which I didn't really appreciate as I was watching, but it's a nice touch. You have this character also played by Isabella Adjani, who is almost like the idealized version of her. I won't spend long on it. Suffice to say that Isabella Adjani as Anna is characterized by the color blue consistently. In fact, you can even, we worked out whether she was present at places literally by whether blue objects were present, specifically her car at the end. So they're quite consistent with that. This version of her is dressed always in white and seems to be like the idealized version of her.
yes, calmer, more maternal, sort of present and loving and interested in Mark.
Yeah, much more orderly, working as a teacher.
And I think the emphasis on the maternal elements of it is probably quite important as well, because the teacher is consistently there for their son, and is a sort of consistent presence for him, and even sort of babysits for him. And then at the end, Mark takes his son to her to protect him when he goes off to shoot the police. So she's clearly a sort of consistent, maternal, caring, connected presence. She's aware of his son having nightmares, and sort of, having nightmares and having kind of welfare issues that, his mother should be aware of, or his parents should be aware of, and aren't, because they're disconnected from him. Whereas she is there, she's caring, and she is very gentle, but she's interested in Mark as well.
Can I draw a contrast there? So she just, you notice she comes into the house, she sort of automatically takes on the maternal wifely duties. Like she sort of instantly, just very naturally pops in, starts bathing Mark. Bathing the kid. Bathing the kid. Now you can say that there's a logic to it, because she basically looks identical to Anna. But this thing flows very natural to her. Whereas I was recalling the scene with Anna in the kitchen doing, a standard wifely duty. She is mincing some meat, and she gets increasingly manic and upset whilst doing that. until eventually the meat saw that she was using to cut up the meat, she turns it on herself.
Yeah.
And it's like the act of being a maternal wife is triggering the manic episode for her.
Yeah.
So that contrasts with this ideal one who just naturally starts behaving in a maternal, caring, feminine manner.
Yes.
It's very interesting.
It's a very interesting contrast.
What complicates it is that she has green eyes.
And therefore is potentially a worm clone.
If she's not a worm clone, which I kind of think she is, but then we have to wonder how she got there. The process of getting a worm clone is not exactly clear, but you should not be surprised about this. This is a film working on kind of nightmare logic. Don't expect there to be a worm clone creation machine that can be uncovered. It's far more like something arising from your psyche. Don't try and interrogate it in strictly logical terms. But it kind of works with our reading of Mark 2.0 is Anna's perfect husband, the ideal one, and she is Mark's perfect wife.
Yes.
And in the end, there's just this odd tension of the two of them. You don't know if they're connected or not, but Mark has gone straight to her.
Mark 2.
Mark 2.0 has gone straight to her. She's been left with the kid. And basically chaos is erupting outside. It's basically, you get the impression that the world is ending outside. There are sounds of sirens and explosions. And it's like this cataclysmic moment. And she's almost faced with this choice that you never see answered. Is she letting the new Mark in? And at that point, it's almost like the world is ending because Mark and Anna have been completely replaced. They've been made obsolete.
Yes.
But there's this new kind of almost soulless version that is going to carry on. I mean, I don't even know what to do with that. I just think that's what is going on here.
Yes, I don't really know what to do with it. That's the trouble with the film. I felt like it didn't give me enough to have a clear sense of where it might want me to go. There's death of the author, and then there's the author's just given up and gone home.
A kind of shrug of...
There's shrug of the author.
I don't know. I reckon there's deeper things in this, but it is a movie that I would need to watch a couple more times, and probably I'll just listen to that director's commentary that the NREB found. I'd be interesting, but I mean, you know how I like to do it? I like to get my own impression first before I looked at anyone else.
The Cambridge School.
Exactly, yeah. When I did this video on Get Out, I did not look up any sources. I didn't look up any interviews. I just looked at the film and I thought, okay, what do I think it's saying? And after that, I hunted out interviews to find out if young Jordan Peele was agreeing. I was very happy that he was. There are a few cases where he was saying something a bit different, but that's what makes it interesting. I don't really like to just have the director tell you the answer straight away for something like this. Well, that does bring us very much to the end of Possession. We could delve a heck of a lot deeper on it. We could do a 5-hour scene by scene, but I think I might lose the will.
I think you might lose your wife.
Bless you. I mean, you were saying like, are we gonna finish this?
From about I lasted about I was over an hour in. How long is it? Is it 2 hours?
You definitely got over an hour. Yeah, it's just about 2 hours.
Yeah, I got over an hour, and then from that point, I was kind of like, every 10, 15 minutes, I was like, can I just check how long's left? And we got to about half an hour left, and I was like, I am so tempted to walk away right now. But I stuck it out. I did watch the whole thing, but at what cost?
At what cost, indeed. Yeah. Okay, folks. Well, I think that is probably everything we have on Possession. I'm personally quite grateful we were asked to review it. It's interesting. I will go for that. I got a lot out of it. And what I'm kind of hoping for is that for anyone who said it was just boring crap. All I want to do is nudge you to, okay, it was trying to do something interesting. Not my thing at all, but I see it was trying to do something interesting. These films are a challenge. Oh, God. Gatsby wants a 5-hour lap session. That's what he wants. Yes, Mima. Waifu is very forgiving. We all appreciate Waifu's efforts.
I specifically made her highlight that one.
Okay. Yeah, so hopefully, if you really love this film, we did it justice. I hope maybe we gave you a new way of looking at it.
Joe!
Oh,
That's
no!
Johnny! No!
Not again, Joe!
Are you, Joe, be honest. Did you have someone, because I don't know if they were in the UK, but in the UK, the law is you can't run down animals to then take them home as roadkill. Were you tag teaming with a friend and taking that home for free road beef?
Oh, dear. Road beef?
Road beef.
Oh, no.
Anyway, I hope you're okay, and I'm sorry that the cow probably isn't.
Oh, bless you, Joe. We are basically rounding up at this point, but it's good you dropped in. Thanks so much. I guess you can watch the whole discussion on replay. All right. Okay, so yeah, as I was saying, if you love this film, I hope we did it justice. I saw some people saying that they'd liked it and they got a new way of looking at this, so that's awesome. That's what I want. And if you hated it, I hope you at least saw that Żuławski was trying to do something interesting, even if it's not for you, and that is fine. Okay, now we will move on to closing thoughts and score. Chat, I see you started getting them in. I'll let Crow Minions vote for Gatsby going 5.5 burgers. Sorry, 5 out of 12 burgers as a starting gambit. What about this? John going for 11 burgers. How about you, Wifey? Do you want to start giving closing thoughts and score?
I mean, it's not the worst film I've ever seen.
It's not Jack and Diane.
No. I was tempted initially, sort of by about 90 minutes into it, I would probably have given it a rating of 2 burgers served by the chap from that video in Starbucks that was on Twitter earlier this week. If anyone doesn't get that reference, be grateful. But I think there's some interesting stuff in there. The performances were incredible, even if I didn't fully get what they were doing. It was a really interesting look at sort of the plot of the film allows you to look at various different things through kind of quite symbolic lenses. So there's a lot to unpick if it's your kind of thing. So I'd probably give it, I don't like being mean to films, but probably 5 out of 12, with a side helping of some quite high doses of antidepressants for everyone involved in making it.
Is that like a particularly personal score rather than like a more filmmaking quality score?
What do you mean?
I mean, you could say like it's 5 out of 12 because I recognise it had quality, but personally I hated it.
I wouldn't say I hated it, but yeah, 5 or 6 out of 12 because yes, there was a lot in there that was high quality, but yeah, not my cup of tea. Mima, that is exactly how Gatsby felt about it. Although he did like the amount of time he had for sitting on your lap and just being fussed.
He did get a lot of lap time. I'm seeing exactly what I expected. Very divided scores. So you got Crow Minion's actual score there. Oh, okay, yeah. 5 out of 12 for Gatsby and 9 out of 12 for you, Crow. Very good. I can go with that. So 5, waifu.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, no apologies for scores except for Harry and giving Mulholland Drive a 2.
That is banned.
Oh dear. Anyway, no, we love him really.
No, we don't.
11 burgers for Victoria. Nice. This is what I expected. Quite a split here. Quite a split.
Most people I would say in this seem to like it quite a lot. I think I might be in the minority.
No. Well, there's mix. There's a mix. I'm seeing some 3s in there and some other 5s.
The 3s were for Gatsby.
Yeah, but Gatsby really did have opinions.
It's true.
Okay, closing thoughts so we stay on Super Nanny's good side. I mean, I've kind of said it. I like a movie. I'll tell you what, a contrast I used when I was talking to someone else about this in DMs. Next week's guest, actually. I enjoy Lynch films a lot more, even though they're kind of doing similar things. And I think it's mostly because even though they're surreal, deep horror that you decode, with Lynch, there is a sort of compelling, seductive dream logic that I'm invited into. Whereas Possession had a sort of artistic art piece theatricality that I did feel excluded me a lot more. I also, just the energy of it is draining, it is exhausting. I can't even imagine how the actors felt trying to deliver these performances. And it's tough on the audience as well. So I feel I gained a lot of respect for what it was trying to do. But as an actual enjoyable experience, I can't rate it as high. So I think I have to blend that sort of quality and personal preference. I probably come out it's very interesting, but I think it's an 8.5 for me.
Fair enough.
It's a difficult thing of like, I just found it very hard to watch, even though I can massively respect the director and what he did. So I do think I have to go at about an 8.5. And you know, 8.5 burgers. It's probably the fillet of fish, and I'm not sure what the sauce is, but there's a lot of it, and I'm not sure I asked for all of it.
It was possibly scraped off the floor of a Subway.
Yeah. Oh, 6.5 buns going in.
6 out of 12.
6 out of 12. What am I doing?
Numbers.
I'm very tired.
Maths.
6 out of 12 buns only.
Chloe's very good at maths. She likes numbers.
Bless. All right. I think that is us basically done. So I will round off the way I'm always going. Oh, hello. Do we have a late NREAB one there as well? Mark Commode would rate this highly. You know Mark Commode would be loving this. Okay. So, yeah, we've given thoughts and scores. Hopefully got some newfound respect for Possession. I want to thank everyone who recommended it. It was a very good recommendation. Next week, we are following up with a similar surreal horror. Very different tone, though. We are covering David Lynch's Lost Highway. And we'll be joined by Harry from the Lotus Eaters.
Nice.
Yeah, I saw him defending David Lynch, and I thought, okay, I've got to get this lad on stream sometime. So he is coming on next week. Maybe I'll try and get a review from Harry, and I think we'll also be rejoined by TCG. That's going to be nice. I've missed that crime guy. I've missed having him on. And tell you what, since he is not here to shill himself, I will just say he has a fairly short video, an 11-minute one on the Lululemon murder. It's very good, very good. And it's got quite an interesting twist you won't see coming. I'll also shill for a very unusual stream that I did on Sunday night, which was about 12 Angry Men. I had on an excellent guest, Pharaoh, and we took a very different angle. We talked about how 12 Angry Men tries to convince the audience, making no reference whatsoever to the actual logical arguments made. We talked purely about persuasion techniques, and Pharaoh just elevated the stream to a level that I could never have done. So look for that. That was my stream on Sunday. Give that a watch. Oh, hello. Victoria, I have good news for you. I recently covered Wolf Creek. I occasionally do a thing I've tried called real horror versus real horror. So real life versus real as in cinema real. The first one we did was on something called Ghost Watch, but the second one was on Wolf Creek. And I was joined by that crime guy. So he covered the real life horror, the real life incident that inspired the film on his channel. And then we had a discussion on my channel about the film. So if you want to watch that, give that a go. Well, I think that's probably pretty much everything. Yep. If you haven't seen it, watch the 12 Angry Men stream from Sunday. watch the Get Out video I did from about a week ago. And most definitely, before next week, watch Lost Highway by David Lynch. I think that is pretty much everything. So I will thank Waifu.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed these chats.
Yeah,
It's nice because we always talk about film anyway.
that's true. It's just nice to sort of feel like there are more people listening. Yes.
All right. And yeah, we will be onto a, well, December doesn't really have a theme. It's just a whole bunch of things that I thought would be fun. So December's going to be a bit of a mixed bag, but just lots of fun for you all. So I hope you enjoy that. I am going to thank you all for watching. Thank you for keeping chat nice and active. It's much appreciated. And I am going to leave it there. Thanks, y'all. Tschüss.